Congratulate the House of Representatives and the private sector organizers of this event for doing what I believe is the right thing to do, not just for the oil and gas industry, but all aspects of our national life. Opening up the space for debate and opening up the space for contributions from everyone. Nigeria is a very active country, and everywhere you go, you find that Nigerians make contributions even when it's not their business. So when it's our business, you can imagine how interested we are and why we need to be heard. Besides, we're probably one of the most well-educated and best informed people on the face of the earth. And I say this with all seriousness. Everywhere I've been, you find that the quality of contributions by Nigerians is always very, very high. And it's because we're very well educated, we're very well informed. But sometimes that also gives us a great deal of problems because we are sometimes into what they call analysis paralysis. After analyzing and presenting several papers and several documents, getting things done sometimes sometimes is a challenge. So I hope that this is going to be much different, and that a lot of that will depend not just on the National Assembly and the federal government, but also on all the stakeholders who will keep everyone honest and hold everyone to account. So I'd like to thank again the House of Representatives, led of course by the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker, for this very great opportunity to contribute to the debate. I cannot of course touch all the points that have been made, and we've been told that that I will get and that the government will get a summary of all that has been said here. But I also know that you've had an interaction with the Honorable Minister for Petroleum Resources, Minister for State for Petroleum Resources. And I've also had the benefit of conversation with him and taking a look at his presentation. So I won't go over the various things that he has already mentioned because that will certainly be a waste of time. But I want to say that it's important for us to do something very quick about petroleum industry legislation. The form that will take, of course, is what we're hoping we can fashion. The proposal of government is to have 3 pieces of legislation that hopefully will cover the ground. And I'm sure that the Minister had already mentioned the proposal to have the Petroleum Industry Reform Bill, which will deal with governance and regulatory issues for upstream, midstream, and downstream, and for not just for oil, but also gas. Then the Petroleum Fiscal Reform Bill, which will address fiscal reform and all its ramifications. And then the Petroleum Revenue Management Bill, which addresses the utilization of petroleum revenue. Now, I am fascinated by the idea of a host community bill as a separate bill. And I think that even from the point of view of signaling, that would be important. Because clearly, a lot of agitation, especially around the treatment of host communities, environmental issues, issues of what host communities are entitled to and not entitled to, will probably be dealt with, and I think it's wise to deal with it in legislation. If that legislation can be a standalone legislation, then clearly that would be a good development indeed, and I intend to take that on board. But it's not just about passing legislation, and I think that it's very important that we bear in mind that legislation by itself doesn't resolve many of the problems that we experience. A lot of our problems are, related to corruption, lack of transparency. If you look at the problems of the oil industry, a lot of opacity. I mean, it's just one of the most opaque industries that you'll ever find. The more you look, as they say, the less you see. And I think that we really need to open up the industry and enable it to function in a transparent manner so that everyone can contribute to what is going on and can understand it better. In my view, legislation must address questions of discretion, ministerial discretion in particular, so that we're able to put things through a transparent process, open bids for allocations or whatever kind, and that in implementation, the main issues of governance are addressed. I think that if you look at what has happened so far, you will find that the NNPC, and of course the various agencies under it, have just over the years have acquired a terrible reputation for just being opaque and for their systems and all of that not being run properly. Some of that has to do with the fact that it is government. And frankly, my belief is that we must take a look at how to, as much as possible, ensure that government plays less and less a role, aside from its purely regulatory function. I believe that what should happen is that we should have a regulatory body which would address questions of regulation and look over regulation. But in all other aspects, or most other aspects, we really should allow the private sector and the private sector to take preeminence, because in my view, if you don't de-emphasize government, especially in industry or business, you're going to keep having some of the problems, especially the problems of corruption that you find, because there ought to be, those who are involved in business ought to have a stake in ensuring that profit is made and ensuring that businesses are run efficiently. Unfortunately, that's not the case where government runs a business. Efficiency isn't usually a priority. And of course, profit sometimes is sacrificed on the altar of political necessity and all other considerations. So I believe that we must move towards transparency, and also we must not be afraid, and we must not be shy of holding people to account for what has gone wrong in the industry. I think we must be open to ensuring that we hold people to account for what has gone wrong, so that in the future people don't do the same things. The other point which I think bears noting is the agitation of the host communities, and of course, I'm sure that has come up several times. It's come up here very frequently also. Again, we must not be shy of holding leadership responsible. Leadership in the host communities, leadership in the states, leadership everywhere over the years, responsible for some of the huge amounts of money that have gone into the oil-producing areas, and that do not appear to have made any impact at all. Because anyone who goes to the Niger Delta today does not see a place where you can say that the billions of naira that has been allocated in various forms, either through state allocations, NDDC allocations, special levies, and all sorts of things. If you look at that place, you just don't get the sense that anything has been spent there. It is just wasteland. And I think that we must be able to say and hold leadership accountable. It's okay for us to talk, in the air about, do something for this, do something for that. But billions has gone literally into the swamps in the Niger Delta. And I think it's important for us to be able to say that some people must be held responsible for this kind of conduct. Otherwise, no matter how nice the legislation, no matter what you say about what host communities are entitled to, some people will make away with most of it, and we'll be back to where we are today in very short order, unless we're able to put in place a system whereby we hold our leaders to account, whether they are local leaders, state leaders, federal leaders, we hold them to account, and we say that you must show us what you've done with the resources that you have already. I believe that we must work very, very quickly indeed. The Ogoni cleanup, there is a work plan Of course, I'm sure many of us are following with the UNEP and the Ministry of Environment. There's a work plan which has been developed, and we're hoping that we'll be able to follow through with that. Some of the instability in the Delta at the moment is, of course, not helping plans to begin the cleanup. Already we have a commitment for $1 billion, which is ready to fund the work plan. So at least there is a commitment for that amount of money. I know that the project coordinator is about to be appointed. That has already been advertised. There's a board of trustees and governing council. And the cleanup, I believe, can start very, very quickly. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be held up by any further bureaucracies. But I think that one of the critical things is that we must recognize that this is not going to be a few days or a few years. The program is meant to be a program that will extend to about 30 years in all. So it's bound to be a fairly long program. But I think the important thing is to start. The important thing is to at least to get started with that project and to move on quickly thereafter. Finally, I just want to say that we must take the opportunity that we have today to not only pass legislation, but to put in place systems whereby we're able to maximize our oil and gas resources. Oil and gas resources will not be as priced as they are today. And if you're following world trends, if you're following the trends all over the world, you will find that there is an increasing de-emphasis. We've lost most of our market in America because of shale oil. Of course, you know that America was one of our primary importers of our oil. But now shale has more or less taken over. And with the increasing sophistication in production, it may well be that shale oil might even become more prominent. What is more, I mean, some of our best importers, for instance, Asia, many of them are developing alternatives to fuel. For instance, if you look at Japan, Japan today has more car charging stations than fuel stations. So they're using more electric cars. And gradually, in fact, if you look at some of the figures, by 2030, thereabouts, many of these countries, China, Japan, will be doing so much in terms of electric cars. As a matter of fact, now they are giving subsidies to those who are buying electric cars and giving subsidies to producers of electric cars. So there's obviously a strategy on the part of even the Asian countries to whom we export at the moment to de-emphasize the use of oil and gas. And we're not going to be in the same situation as we were 10 years ago. So if we don't get moving quickly and organize ourselves quickly, then we're going to find ourselves, in a very, very short while, holding on to very much oil that may not be as much value as it is today. So the next few years are going to be very critical in being able to maximize what we can from our oil resources. Final thing is with respect to the collaboration between the federal and the federal government and the legislature. Of course, I think it was mentioned that the first PIB was killed on account of the suspicions between the federal government and the legislature and the various problems associated with that. But I want to say that we are committed, the federal government is committed to working with the National Assembly to ensure that this particular set of petroleum industry legislation are passed and are passed in good time. On our part, we certainly have no agenda, no hidden agenda, and I can assure you that we're all for ensuring that we have good pieces of legislation, and we certainly hold ourselves responsible for ensuring that we are quick to produce all that is required, and that this legislation are passed, and I pray that they are passed within the shortest possible time. If possible, by the end of the year, if we can get all of that done. Thank you very much.